We will never complain about sunshine in January, ever. But it does mean that moving around and trying to figure out where to be so that the light is not washing me out is always a challenge. So we're trying this again for one more week and then we'll move around, I think. If someone were to ask you which part of the body you are, would you know? Sometimes, and with some people, it's pretty obvious. When someone is the mouth, for example. Or a kind listener might be the ears. I remember knowing someone who lived by the strength of his handshake. But those who work with their hands might identify there too. I'm sure we have heard the expression that they are the brains of the operation. But back to you. When you think about the groups or the bodies that you connect with, perhaps even in your family, what part do you play? There is something unique about this particular letter that Paul writes to the Corinthian church, where he talks about parts of the body. And what is so unusual is how easily it can be understood in today's world. There aren't many metaphors from the Bible that translate really well into our current culture. Life back then was so very different than it is now. Life 10 years ago is so very different than it is now, right? But there are still some things that are much the same about people. And when Paul talks about hands and feet and eyes and ears, we get it. And if you were listening closely, it's not even that hard to figure out what's going on that made Paul write that letter. Something is happening in the community of Corinth that is dividing them. People are saying to each other, I don't need you. You don't matter. Some are suffering alone. Some have no one to share celebrations with. And others are being competitive, trying to lift themselves up by putting other people down. And as much as our world has completely changed, this much has not. In fact, we hold up independence as a virtue far more than anyone did in Paul's day. It is easier than ever to pretend that we don't need each other. No doubt you have noticed that our political discourse is predicated these days on putting other people down. Negative or attack ads are expected in every election cycle and beyond. I don't expect you need me to offer examples, for it is on the news everywhere you choose to look. It seems that dehumanizing and devaluing each other has become completely acceptable. And from that public discourse, it slips into our communities and it slips into our private spheres in various ways that then we tell each other, I don't need you. You don't really matter to me. You are incompetent because you don't do it the way I would or the way I want it. Have you ever been made to feel that way? I have. Have you ever made somebody else feel that way? I am sorry to know and admit that I am sure that I have. And yet, We know that Paul is right about this when we think about that metaphor of the body. Lately, I have had cause to notice how much I take my eyesight for granted and how much I depend on it. And over the last couple of years of so many medical appointments and treatments, I have had to pay attention to body parts I did not have to care about before. For example, because the kind of cancer I have can be really hard on your kidneys, I have to take special care of them. I can't take any ibuprofen or NSAIDs for pain anymore. I miss Advil so much. But I need to take ones that get processed through the liver rather than the kidneys. The point, of course, is this: your liver can't do what your kidneys can, but you need both in a healthy body. Your feet can't do what your eyes can do, but you really want both. And when you lose the functions of any parts of your body, you are aware of how much of a challenge it is. Some of us discovered that in an elevator this morning. Can you survive without some of your parts working? Often, yes, but that's not really the point. The point is that each one has a part to play. And it makes no sense to start valuing or particularly devaluing any particular one because we depend on them all. And when one part hurts, the whole body hurts. Isn't that so? When you stub your toe, your whole body knows it. And when it comes to people, Paul argues, the same is true, whether we realize it or not, whether we take it for granted or not. And how different might our communities be if we treated one another like that was true? There's a very old story, not quite as old as the Bible, from the 16th century, called The Rabbi's Gift. You may know it. I haven't told it for a really long time, though, so I'm going to tell it today. The story concerns a monastery that had fallen on hard times. Once a great order, as a result of waves of anti-monastic persecution, it had become decimated to the extent that there were only 5 monks left: the abbot and 4 others, all over 70, 75 years in age. Clearly, it was coming to the end of its life. And in the deep woods surrounding the monastery, there was a little hut that a rabbi from a nearby town occasionally used. And as he agonized over the imminent death of his order, it occurred to the abbot at one such time to go visit and ask the rabbi if by some possible chance he could offer some advice to save the monastery. So the rabbi welcomed the abbot at the hut, but when the abbot explained the purpose of his visit, the rabbi could only commiserate with him. "Oh, I know how it is," he said. "The spirit has gone out of the people. It's the same in my town. Almost no one comes to the synagogue anymore." So the old abbot and the old rabbi wept together. Then they read parts of the Torah and quietly spoke of deep things. And the time came for the abbot to leave, and they embraced each other. The abbot said, "It's been a wonderful thing that we should meet after all these years, but I have failed in my purpose for coming here. Is there nothing you can tell me, no piece of advice you can give me that can help save my dying order?" "No, I'm sorry," the rabbi responded. "I have no advice to give. The one thing I can tell you is that the Messiah is one of you." Well, when the abbot returned to the monastery, his fellow monks gathered around him. "Well, what did the rabbi say? Could he help?" No, he couldn't help, the abbot answered. We just read and read the Torah. The only thing he did say, just as I was leaving, was that the Messiah is one of us. I don't know what he meant by that. In the days and weeks and months that followed, the old monks pondered this and wondered if there was any significance to the rabbi's words. The Messiah is one of us? Could he have possibly meant one of the monks in the monastery? And if that's the case, which one? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? Yeah, if he meant anyone, he probably meant Father Abbot. He's been our leader for more than a generation. On the other hand, he might have meant Brother Thomas. Certainly, Brother Thomas is very holy. Everyone knows that Thomas is a man of light. Certainly, he would not have meant Brother Eldred. Eldred gets very crotchety at times. But come to think of it, even though he can be a thorn in everyone's side, when you look back on it, Eldred is virtually always right. Often very right. Maybe the rabbi meant Brother Eldred. Well, surely not Brother Philip. Philip is so passive, he's real nobody. But then, almost mysteriously, he has a gift for somehow always being right there when you need him. He just magically appears by your side. Maybe Philip is the Messiah. Of course, the rabbi didn't mean me. He couldn't have meant me. I'm just an ordinary person. Yet supposing he did. What if I'm the Messiah? Oh, God, not me. I couldn't be that much for you, could I? Oh. While contemplating in just this manner, the old monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect, on the off chance that one among them might actually be the Messiah. And on the off chance that each monk himself might be the Messiah, they began to treat themselves with extraordinary respect. Now, because the forest in which it was situated was so beautiful, it happened that people still occasionally came to visit the monastery, to picnic on its tiny lawn, to wander along some of its paths, and even now and then to go into the dilapidated chapel to meditate. And as they did so, without even being conscious of it, they sensed this aura of extraordinary respect that now began to surround the 5 old monks. It seemed to radiate out from them and permeate the atmosphere of the place. There was something strangely attractive, even compelling about it. Hardly knowing why, they began to come back to the monastery more frequently, to picnic, to play, to pray. And they began to bring their friends and show them this special place. And their friends brought their friends. And the younger men who came to visit the monastery started to talk more and more with the old monks. And after a while, one asked if he could join them. And then another. And then another. So within a few years, the monastery had become a thriving order. And thanks to the rabbi's gift, a vibrant center of light and spirituality in the realm. Do you suppose that there are contemporary environments today that might be changed if people treated each other differently? Would different environments encourage people to share their gifts more easily, more generously? What about you? What is your gift? Do you know? What would allow you to share it more generously? I saw a video not too long ago of Scott Galloway who argues, we do people a disservice when we tell them to follow their passions. Instead, he says, what we should do is ask people to follow their talents. Notice what you're good at. and commit to becoming even better at it. You don't have to be the best to have something to have a gift either. That's okay. It is clearly not the will of God that one person be responsible for the work of God in the world. And as such, it stands to reason that there is not only one way that the work of God will be done in the world. Sometimes the quiet gifts have the biggest impact. So, what is your part? Are you a nose? A fingernail? Perhaps you're the heart? Is the name Buckminster Fuller familiar to you? He was an engineer, an architect, an inventor. He had 28 patents. He authored 28 books. He received 47 honorary degrees. His most well-known invention is the geodesic dome. It's been produced over 300,000 times worldwide. His influence on generations of designers and architects and scientists and artists working to create a more sustainable planet is ongoing. Well, Buckminster Fuller, it's said that he contemplated dying by suicide at the age of 32, after a series of failures that left him feeling that he had made such a mess of life that the best move would be for him to remove himself and make things simpler for his wife and his daughter, those he loved. But instead of choosing to end his life, he made a decision to change the focus of his life and change it from, instead of worrying about himself, to caring for the world. And considering himself an average individual without special monetary means or academic degrees, he devoted himself to asking this question: what is it on this planet that needs doing, that I know something about, that probably won't happen unless I take responsibility for it? Trying to find out what an individual like him could do to improve humanity's condition that large organizations or governments or enterprises inherently could not do. And the world was extremely better for it. And so was he. It is my hope that this community of faith is a place where we will build each other up and not push each other down, where we will encourage and embrace the different gifts that each one brings. It is my hope that you will feel called, even anointed by the Spirit of God, to offer your gifts and not be afraid, for we need each other. We are all important. This is what it means to be the body of Christ. Amen.